Good evening. Tonight we will continue the grand adventure and mystery titled, I traveled back to the Victorian era, but the world I saw was nothing like in the history books. Part 4. My body feels weak and disoriented. I've crash landed and I'm stuck in the past. Please save my soul. This post has been written to tell Norvinium to come save me quickly. I hope that this message reaches them. It's supposed to be January 1920, Varanasi, India, during the British Raj. My time machine number 23 has crash landed and isn't functioning properly. It feels like it's a small, narrow alley where I've landed. The alley looks empty, and the time appears somewhere around midnight. I was supposed to land at the Dashashwamed Ghat on the banks of the river Ganga, but it looks as if I might have landed in one of the alleys. The city must be sleeping, as I don't see anyone when I leave the alley to the riverbank. I had assumed that such a populated city, I would see at least a few people even in the dead of night, but apparently not. I called my rescue team at Norvinium to come pick me up and take the time machine back. They say they'll arrive in an hour, since there are many requests from almost half of the volunteer testers, and counting, needing rescue. Waiting for pickup, I decided to explore the city. Walking alongside the riverbank brought me to many historical places and places that I had recognized. I was born in the city of Varanasi in the year 1990. It looked like the city hadn't changed much, at least on the banks. That made sense, as these places have a huge historical and religious importance, and the place would not be completely changed by the government, ever. The river looked different though. The river was not water, it was solid white, and it felt like jelly. The river was misshapen and was not flat at all like a normal river. It almost looked like pieces of white jelly were stacked one by one on top of each other. I dared not touch it for more than a second at the foot of the pile. There were hundreds of piles of various sizes and shapes, the biggest being around 5 feet over the riverbank, and parts of them were moving. There were protrusions in many places that were moving in different directions and speeds, repeating one single motion over and over again. This was not normal. There was no water in the river, and it was not ice. And anyway, there couldn't be any ice in this 30 degrees Celsius weather. I kicked the jelly at the corner of the pile, and a pocket of it deflated, oozing out a thick, dark, viscous substance, which I immediately backed away from. I backed away from the river to get ahead from the jelly-like substance. I decided to enter the city interior. Through the Munshi Ghat, I enter some alleyways which open up to an area called the Bengali Tola. I had never previously been here, even when I lived in the city, but I had heard that it was an area of Varanasi where the people of Bengal lived, that had a college and a school and some shops. But there was something completely different from what anything that's possible in a city in India. All the buildings in the area were made completely of platinum and had an architectural style that I didn't recognize. The buildings were completely plain, with no art design or visible features to them. They were all just plain walls with door frames made of silver, with not even a door in them. I entered one of the buildings, but the inside was just one room. There was a bed, but it was hard as stone, even though it looked like a normal Indian cot bed made of rope. There was nothing else in the room, except for a huge radio which I turned on. There was music playing, but it definitely wasn't Indian or British. Actually sounding kind of robotic and futuristic. I exited the building, but I'm no longer in the area I originally was. I was back on the riverbanks of the city. Somehow I had been transported back to the riverfront area. Was I drugged? The place in itself looked completely weird and different from what it should have been. The night was passing, and dawn was about to break. I recognized the area as the Asi Ghat, or the 80th Ghat. This area was considered to be an end of historical Varanasi, and any further would be later constructions. I realized that it had been over an hour, and help still hasn't arrived. So I started walking, back to the Dashashwamed Ghat, to pick up my phone and laptop, which I had left in there, to contact Norvinium again. By the time I reached the time machine, dawn had broken, and I assumed that the people would be coming out soon. I called Norvinium, but they weren't picking up. I did have a spare change of clothes in the time machine that was era appropriate, so I changed into them and started walking back towards the ghats. I had only worn a sari a few times before in my life, even as an Indian, so wearing it made me feel a little uncomfortable. I sat down on the ghat steps and decided to start writing my logs for record keeping. As said by Norvinium, I checked on my phone, and the time was 7 a.m. when I started writing. Suddenly, I heard a huge rumble. Was it an earthquake? No, Varanasi doesn't have earthquakes of this magnitude ever. The river was shaking, the jelly was shaking. A piece detached from the main body of the jelly and shaped itself into a humanoid shape. One by one, from all the piles of the substance in the river, pieces started to detach themselves and take shape. The pieces started leaving the river and walking towards the city. There were thousands that I could see with the naked eye, but I would not be surprised if the pieces, or creatures, were in the millions extending throughout the whole city. I ran and hid in an alley behind the ghat. The creatures had no face and only glowing eye sockets. They barely had a body, which looked like a bunch of wires in the shapes of arms and legs. It's hard to describe. It's like when you doodle a human, but draw only the line for the main body, and 2 protruding lines from the shoulder for the hands, and 2 lines from halfway down the main body for the legs. This is how their bodies looked, except at the end of the wires, they didn't have complete legs and arms. A lot of them were walking towards the alley I was hiding in, so I went deeper inside. I went inside a building, but it didn't have any doors, just an open door frame. None of the buildings in this alley did, just like the buildings in the Bengali Tola. Although I am hidden behind a table made of silver, I am extremely scared. Outside of the building, one of them was talking to another. It said, "One of us was killed during the night." The other replied, "No one could have done that. Everyone was asleep." "I know, but I saw it myself. Someone else is here," the first one said. "Why hadn't my rescue come till now? I needed answers for what's happening." I saw a log, posted by one of my fellow test subjects, number 79, about his situation in London. He was stuck inside a building, just like me. But he had a door to keep the creatures out, and he escaped to a palace. I too decided to write a log about what's happening in Varanasi, India, in the year 1920, which I am posting right now. Hundreds of those creatures are outside the building, walking around. If any one of them come inside, they might kill me. Dear God, please save me. And know that if I do not post any update, I must be dead. To all my fellow test subjects, based on what I saw, I believe that these creatures are more vulnerable during the night. They physically cannot move during the night, and can only repeat the last hand and leg actions that they were performing before they turned into jelly, and get stuck to each in clumps. If you get attacked by one of these creatures, know that it is easier to deal with them during the night. I hope that even if I die, others might make it. Number 66, if you're reading this, you went the furthest in the past, so please investigate the cause of this weird history-changing phenomenon. To my family, I love you. I leave all of my worldly possessions to my brother. If anything happens to me, please remember me and keep me in your heart. Goodbye. Goodbye. Oof. That ending is sad. So many of these testers are just perishing. Well, it's not certain that this guy will. Maybe number 79 will survive after all. But I have a feeling that it's going to transition to 66 to figure out what exactly is causing this. I don't know how his small change in the past, how it could turn people into jelly. Instead of evolution as we know it, now it's just jelly. I mean, I like jelly, but not this kind of jelly. This isn't acceptable. But the good news is, they do have a vulnerability. Late at night, apparently they can be taken on, but how do you kill them all? Should you even kill them all? It certainly is a weird ethical question. It's not really their fault that they exist, and they do exist now, and by our own actions we're trying to undo that, so I understand why they would fight back. It's very strange. I don't think there's a way for us to coexist though, because our own history has been shifted, and now there's just probably one time bubble left to fight against them from.